The Stock of the Day is brought to you by IG, Australia's #1 CFD provider. With over 17,000 markets and extended trading hours, turn US earnings season volatility into opportunity. Get started at IG.com.
And stock of the day, I thought we'd take a look at Rio. Of course, it had its half-yearly results out today. Came in at $8.8 billion US dollars, which was 10% lower than the previous corresponding period. Rio was saying that that was because of supply chain disruption from the mines through some train issues that they had getting to the ports. Rio share price up on the back of the result. Most of the early reports from analysts seem to not be too concerned with the 10% drop because of the reasons given. Philip, what do you think of the result and Rio?
Look, it looked to be in line. Maybe a dividend a touch weak, but you don't buy a resource company for a dividend. So most of the metrics were there or thereabouts. They provide a lot of updates in the lead up, so it wasn't much of a surprise. For me, what do you do from here? It looks cheap based on consensus forecasts, and I don't expect them to change much after today. I'm paying close attention to the iron ore price and the copper price. They were both a lot higher than they are currently. Copper was 10,000's come off a bit. Iron ore was recently 110, 115, it's now back at 100. I'm a simple person. Commodity stocks follow commodity prices, and while those commodities are on the decline, it's probably going to be hard for this company to outperform. Probably going to wait to see where those commodity prices settle, whether consensus is correct or not. But once they've settled, our house view is copper grows higher over time, but we tend to agree with consensus that iron ore probably does fall before it goes up. Right. So I would call this one a hold just to see where those two commodities settle over the next week to 1 month before I'd believe the analyst forecasts and it's cheap.
Okay, up $3. We don't have any charts today because of the AW issue, but up $3 today to $118. 52-week high of $136. So it's a bit down on over the last 12 months on the charts.
Yeah, and I suspect that's driven by, not that it's related, but some of their peers have put out higher costs. So I think sigh of relief today that the cost didn't blow out. Right. But I think first and foremost, the copper price coming off and the iron ore price coming off, stocks have fallen in sympathy.
So hold for Rio?
Hold for Rio.
Is it preferred over BHP? Do you have a preference?
For me, perhaps yes, only because it's maybe a little more diversified. BHP sold their coal assets. I mean, you can and should own both. I prefer diversified commodity plays rather than a single commodity. I mean, we'll talk about another one in a minute. Yeah. But at least they've got a lot of moving parts. I mean, they're in iron ore, they're in copper, they're in aluminium. So you get a bit of a diversity, and a lot of those commodities are needed for longer term growth, so they should grow over time. So slight preference for Rio, but not by much.
Michael, what do you think of the result and the stock at the moment?
At first glance, it wasn't a bad result. Obviously, the cost factor was a big thing going into it, just given how much cost pressures the rest of the industry have been under in recent times. The dividend was a slight miss. I mean, many in the market were anticipating a 60% payout ratio. They paid out 50%. But as pointed out, you can't really rely on the dividends consistently over time, and has been a pretty good few years for investors in Rio when it comes to the dividends. So that was a slight disappointment, but otherwise, look, just generally speaking, with these commodity type companies, they're not as exciting come reporting season, as they do tend to provide their quarterly updates, which do provide a lot of colour. So you don't get the massive beats and massive misses, and you get the production updates, and you can sort of see how things are tracking through the year. They did achieve a reasonable price for the iron ore, only marginally lower than the previous 12 months. But it's all going to be about the outlook. They still are heavily reliant on iron ore, despite the fact that copper is hopefully becoming a bigger contribution for them in the years to come. They've got some investments going in the lithium space as well. So there's a bit going on there, but ultimately China and the commodity story will play a big part in the direction of the Rio shares. We don't hold Rio, we don't hold BHP, just on a view that things are a bit soft out there in the commodity space, particularly given the environment that we're seeing in China. But they're two of the highest quality miners in the world, the lowest cost of production in the iron ore space. So they're in a pretty decent position to generate good free cash flow regardless of what happens in the iron ore price, within reason, obviously.
Right. So
I'm going to go. I'll happily go a hold, but I'm
Right.
not rushing out to buy them.
But you're not in any of them at the moment.
No iron
No
ore
miners.
exposure. We do have
Right.
miners. We do have some copper exposure. Our views that the outlook for copper is pretty attractive, given it's a massive contributor or massive inclusion in the electrification
Yeah.
of industry globally. The reality is that it's very difficult to get new copper mines approved. It's very hard to actually find good copper grades these days. A lot of the easy stuff has been found and mined over millennium, really, when it comes to copper. So, yeah, that's probably
So
one area.
What copper stocks, or do you just go the wire?
No, so we had, we used to have Samphire. We sold Samphire, rotated into Capstone Copper.
Oh, okay.
Capstone Copper is a big Canadian-based copper miner that was historically just listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, just recently launched the CDI on the ASX. Oz Minerals obviously was the other big one that got acquired by BHP. So a lot of these big miners are trying to build out their exposure to copper because of what seems to be those attractive dynamics long term.
All right. Okay, so a hold from both Philip and Michael on Rio, which is our stock of the day.
The stock of the day was brought to you by IG. Turn volatility into opportunity this US earnings season with extended trading hours on over 110 key US shares. Get started at IG.com.